Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for jumping on here with me. I want to welcome you all to the Weekly Roar. This week, I am transitioning into the next phase of my 2019 personal growth series, and we're about to embark on a leadership journey together. But first, you know me by now. I'm Greg Storch. I'm the founder of Lion Enterprise, a leadership development and coaching company. I am a certified speaker, coach, and trainer with the John Maxwell team and a certified professional coach. Last week, I wrapped up the 15 invaluable laws of growth when I spoke with my lifelong friend, Laura Tuttle, about the law of trade-offs. I spent the first 15 weeks of 2019 speaking with some incredible leaders, coaches, entrepreneurs that I had paired up with each of those laws. And man, they all brought their A game. The stories were inspiring and insightful. And you know what? I grew so much from having them share their time with me and with all of you. So I hope you enjoyed the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth series. If you missed any of the growth series, the 15 weeks, don't worry about it. I've reminded you this every week. You can watch all of them. You just go to my website at lion-enterprise.com. When you go to my homepage, just click up at the top on the Lion's Pride Library, and right there, you will see all of my videos. You can watch all 15, or you just catch the ones that you haven't caught yet. All right, let's jump into this. This week, I'm kicking off phase 2 of my 2019 growth series, and I'm calling this one Follow the Leader, 21 Laws that Every Leader Should Follow. Yes, that's right. For the next 21 weeks, I am going to speak into this book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. But I'm back flying solo again. I will not be having guests, I don't think. I haven't planned for any. So let's talk about the book a little bit, and then let's kick off this first week by speaking about the law of the lid. So first of all, the premise of the book is that, leadership is a complex thing. And if we're going to do it well, then John Maxwell's giving us 21 things that we should be striving to do well in order to lead well. But here's the thing. The reality is that nobody does all 21 of these laws perfectly. So don't worry about it. Over the course of the next 21 weeks, I'm just going to challenge you right now to listen in and keep score for yourself. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 each week on each of the laws and find out where you're at. Which ones are you doing well? And more importantly, which ones aren't coming so easy for you? Where do you need to put in a little bit more work? Identifying your weak areas on these laws can help you determine who you should be surrounding yourself with. Those who show strength in areas maybe where you don't. Try doing that over the next 21 weeks and Just make a little bit of an assessment of yourself and see how you're doing. So as we jump into our first law, I wanted to remind you about a quote. If you've read this book, then you might remember this quote by John Maxwell. And he says, "None of us is as smart as all of us." And that quote comes from what I was just talking about. We may not master all 21 of these laws, and it's important to find out which ones where you're not so great at, because you can augment your weaknesses with other strengths. So none of us is as smart as all of us. So listen, during the course of the next 21 weeks, I am going to keep reminding you of 4 things. And the first thing that I'm going to remind you about, and this comes straight out of the book, is that, first of all, these laws, they can be learned. So if you don't know the law, or you haven't been practicing this law, or you're not good at it, don't worry about it. You can learn these. The second thing is, each one of these laws can stand on their own. Now, they do intertwine, but they also are designed to be individual laws. You can learn one, you can learn all 21, but the more you learn, the better leader you'll become. Now, this is a warning. There's consequences to putting these laws into practice. If you practice them, all of them, all 21 laws, you just may become that leader that people want to follow. And the opposite holds true. If you don't apply these laws, you won't become the leader that people want to follow. So there are consequences to either following or not following these 21 laws. The fourth and final thing that I'm going to keep reminding at the beginning of every law is that these laws form the basis of leadership, and that's why they're so important. So this week we're starting off with the law of the lid. Leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. I can remember reading this book for the first time, and it was not that long ago, actually, a few years ago. It was my first John Maxwell book, and I was determined to become a better leader. I thought I was pretty good already at leadership, but I knew there was a lot more to learn for sure. And I was really captivated by this book. I eventually ordered this thing on Audible. And I listened to it repeatedly for months on end until I was almost reciting the chapters verbatim. So here's the main points about the law of the lid that stood out to me that I just wanted to chat with you about. And I'm going to also share a story with you from my own experience that I feel like is a great example of the impact of the law of the lid and not recognizing when you've hit the lid and have failed to raise the lid. So I'll share that story with you. Okay, here are the main points that stood out to me while I was reading this book. Okay, so the first thing is, leadership is the lid on our effectiveness as a leader. We will never be more effective than our ability to lead others. That's why leadership's so important. And this is the value of it, right? The better leader you are, the more effective you are. So when we see organizations struggling, more often than not, it's because the organization is suffering from a head injury because they keep banging their head up against the leader's lid. I have probably shared some of this story with you. Some of you might be familiar with my own personal journey, but I used to work for a really fast-growing IT company in the Washington, D.C. area. And when I first joined that company, there were about 600 to 700 employees. And by the time I left 7 years later, there were almost 2,000 employees. So that's what I mean by they were rapidly growing. Now, the company that I worked for was focused solely on federal contracts at the federal agencies in Washington, D.C. They had, I forget how many agencies there are in Washington, D.C., but gosh, I want to say that they were doing business with like 10 different federal agencies. Only two of their contracts were providing a good portion or a majority, I would say like 80% of the financial viability for the company. So out of all the ones they've had, there were only two major contracts that were really keeping the company alive. You see, the company was started by a computer programmer who capitalized on the Y2K panic back in 1999. Remember that? That was the Y2K panic was as we were approaching the year 2000. People were saying, hey, the computers weren't programmed to understand year formats that begin with 20. And so there was a panic because it was going to impact the banking industries, the financial industries, well, pretty much every industry. She capitalized on that. And as a computer programmer, she went to one of the agencies and offered to help them assess their situation. And that's how she landed her first contract. And when she won that contract, she actually reached out to a friend of hers that she went to college with up in New York. And she was like, I just won my first contract. I need help. He came down from New York and he helped her out. And he's basically her second-hand person there at the company. You know, it was interesting that she asked for his help because she admittedly didn't know what she was doing. So over the years that I worked there, I observed her. I worked very closely with her, the owner and CEO of this company. And I formed an opinion of my own that she was not a strong leader based on my definition of what that was. Some of the examples are the way she treated the employees and the inability to forecast and plan ahead. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd place her leadership lid at about a 4, maybe. It was low. Her major awards were coming up for recompete. You know, when you're awarded a contract, it's only good for so many years. And then at the end of that term, those contracts have to be recompeted. And, you know, her major ones, those two I was talking about earlier, were coming up for a recompete. And I just recently learned that the largest one, which was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was employing almost half of the company's employees, you know, close to 1,000 people. That contract was not re-awarded. It was actually awarded to one of their competitors. And, you know, someone who I've remained friends with over the years since leaving the company, she's actually been working on packages and letting people go, close to 1,000 people now without employment. Now, I think she may have realized that there was a lid on her leadership because as I was leaving the company, she had spent millions of dollars to bring on new corporate executives to the team to re-strategize and help her reposition herself. She wanted to reposition the company for success as we had these large contracts coming up for recompete. Unfortunately, I personally think it was a too little, too late kind of thing. And I feel like She spent more time increasing her dedication to success and excellence and less time trying to raise her level of leadership. And when you read this chapter, you'll see John's got some graphs in there that explains how, when you spend more time increasing your dedication to success and excellence, the the law of diminishing return takes effect. You don't get very far. The focus needs to be, if you want to compound the return on investment, you need to spend more time raising the level of your leadership. So here's an example of the law of the lid in real life, where this company's effectiveness to compete in the federal sector was hampered by the lid of its leader. So you probably have heard of companies that didn't perform well, and they bring in these new leaders and they turn the companies around. And that's what happens a lot of times, is when you're not performing, when your lid is low and you're not effective, you are replaced, and somebody who has a higher lid is brought in to become more effective. And we've seen it time and time again. Chrysler is a good example, where Lee Iacocca came in and turned Chrysler around, which was later sold. But when he was brought in, it was a failing company, and he turned it around. I would say his leadership lid was high, and he was very effective in turning that company around. So there's another example of of a company, and you can find tons and tons of companies that were failing, where somebody came in. John shares the story of McDonald's, the McDonald's brothers, and Ray Kroc coming in, and it was his leadership that really raised the effectiveness of the McDonald's brand, because the brothers didn't have it. And it made me think of, Apple, which is here I'm sitting at an Apple computer right now, and how, Steve Jobs came in, and, his leadership lid turned the company into a mega hit, right? So there's another great example of a company, and I'm sure you guys probably know more. Ultimately, the question's going to be, how well do you lead? Are you putting a lid on your effectiveness or the potential of those around you? And I'm not just talking about at work. This is personal too. I mean, you can certainly have negative impacts in your personal life as the leader of a family, with your children. So we're not just talking about organizations and leaders. We're talking about any role where you're a leader. If you have influence in any sector, then you are a leader. Listen, the great news about this is that raising your lid is possible, and raising it will increase your effectiveness as a leader, whether, like I said, it's at work leading teams or at home leading families. See, the truth about leadership lids is that we all reach a lid at some point. Some are higher than others. Maybe mine's a 7, and maybe yours is a 9. Maybe somebody else's is a 4. We're all going to hit it eventually, right? But the other thing that's true is, if we don't recognize it early on, that's what can lead to failures, just like it did for my last employer. So I would take some time today to identify any of these that may exist in your leadership, and then begin to address them. So here's some things that you can check. How do you know that you may have hit your lid? That's a great question, right? You can either look to yourself, or you can look to a team if you're leading teams, or a team. You can look at the team, or you can look at both. If you're looking at yourself, do you feel like you're working really hard, harder and harder, but you're just not getting the results you're trying to get? Maybe you're not hitting the goals you're setting, or you keep missing deadlines. Well, it's probably not all from a lack of your effort. You're just not able to get done what you're expecting to get done. So working harder and longer hours, it's okay, but when the results aren't there, then working longer hours is not the answer, and it's probably the symptom of a bigger issue. I would submit to you that you've maybe possibly hit the leadership lid. So check that out. If that's happening to you, think about it. Maybe you're hitting your lid. And then I also mentioned, look to your teams. Maybe your team is regularly underperforming. You know what? There's a reason why NFL coaches get fired when their football team doesn't perform well during a season or two, right? They get let go. If you lead a team and they aren't performing well, or say you're not hitting your targets, the team is regularly underperforming, I strongly recommend you look to yourself first. Why? Because when leaders reach the leadership lid, it has a huge impact on the team they're leading. Are you guys interested more about assessing your lid? At the end of every chapter, I love this, and Don does a great job of this in a lot of his books. This one as well. At the end of every chapter, John has exercises to do and questions you can ask yourself to help you apply the law. So check that out in this chapter at the end. As a matter of fact, there's exercises like this throughout the book in every chapter. In this particular chapter, he's giving us a way to assess our leadership ability and also a way to rate it. So you should go check that out. I have the hard copy of this book, the hardback. So it was a little more expensive, but I believe it's available in paperback and it's under $20. So I highly recommend grabbing this book. Whether you're a new leader, maybe a seasoned leader, or a leader that's midway between a new one and a seasoned one. Maybe you're middle of the road and you just want to grow some more. Then this is going to be definitely for you. I think all of these laws have something for all of you. I think that's going to do it for this week. I'd love to hear some feedback and ideas on this new series. What did you think? Are you excited for the next law? Thanks for tuning in to view this watch party with me as I sit on the train from Rome. Yep, we were in Rome for the last 3 days with my sister-in-law, checking out the sights. We're sitting on the train right now as I'm interacting with you back to Vicenza. So I appreciate your support so much, you guys. So thank you. Okay, everyone, I'll be back here again next week, same place, same time, to speak about the law of influence. The true measure of leadership is influence. Come on, say it with me. Nothing more, nothing less. All right. Hey, I'm also still working on that surprise episode that will broadcast hopefully by the end of May, I'm going to target. So be on the lookout for an announcement on that one. And until we meet again, you guys, remember, be powerful, but stay poised, just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.